Good evening, and welcome to the CBF gathering. My name is Jenny Howell, and I'm the director of the program for Theology, Ecology, and Food Justice, housed at Truett Theological Seminary in Waco, Texas. I'm speaking to you today from the World Hunger Relief Farm, a small 40-acre farm located just outside of Waco, where I teach all my classes on a weekly basis. Out at the farm, alongside with working with goats and ducks and a variety of other animals, I work with some of the hardest workers I've ever known. Skilled farmers and local volunteers who help bring about the production of organic and healthy food for our local community. In this week's gathering, in a week in which the world celebrates Earth Day, we will be invited to explore more fully God's call for us to care for creation. If you were at all like me growing up, perhaps you also thought that the life of faith and life in creation were two separate things. But if you read the story of creation in Scripture, and if you read the texts that follow, you discover that God calls us into relationship with God, and He calls us into relationship with our neighbors, and He calls us into relationship with the land itself. Those three relationships necessarily go hand in hand. Tonight, we will explore more fully the connection between environmental degradation and the suffering of the most vulnerable of communities. At a time in which we anticipate more than 147 million climate change refugees by the year 2050, we recognize the connection more than ever between those two realities. We'll be hearing from friends and members of the fellowship who are on the front lines of work related to these issues. Jason Fileta, a climate change activist, and Jeff Lee, a fellowship missionary working in Macedonia with a cow bank ministry that focuses on sustainable farming. The work ahead for the church is great and vast in these issues, and there is much that the fellowship can do to participate in that work. So on behalf of the fellowship, I invite you tonight to hear from some of our brothers and sisters who are on the front lines of making a difference in the world today.
Our guest is Jason Fileta. Jason is the vice president of Tearfund USA. He founded and served as the first executive director of the Micah Institute at New York Theological Seminary. Jason, thank you for joining the CBF gathering.
Thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be with you.
So you're the son of Egyptian immigrants who grew up in Wheaton, Illinois. How did those two facts shape your identity, your worldview, and your faith?
Wow, that is a large question. So, I would say my parents having immigrated from Egypt was probably the single largest formative piece of my identity. I mean, as a kid, I really learned everything I knew about the world and about God from them. And they were very deeply tied into the community of Christians in Egypt and very, very much aware of things like poverty, persecution, discrimination. And not just aware, they experienced these things themselves. And that's partly why they ended up moving. And so as a child, I was just very much immersed in that world from afar, from the comfort of Wheaton, Illinois. And it was not a tension for me until I was older. So when I was younger, I knew what political asylum was from a very, very young age. I knew all about human rights abuses and things like that, because these were just the things we were praying about at home. These were the things that we were talking about at the dinner table. And I saw my parents work really hard to help their brothers and sisters in every way that they could. And so I mentioned there was a tension when I got older because my understanding of who God was as a child was so formed around the fact that He saw what was wrong in Egypt. He saw what was wrong in the world, and He never intended it to be that way. that was really rooted in me. And we were always crying out to him, seeking comfort, but also finding comfort, knowing that he saw all this and he knew it was wrong, and that he would redeem these things in some way, you know? And so as I got older and entered into like the Wheaton world more fully, you know, when you get to that age where you're like out of your parents' house all the time, especially the Christian world at that time, this is like in the, you know, 80s and 90s, I discovered that God didn't care at all, really, about persecution or discrimination or human rights issues or poverty. You know, I discovered that what God was really concerned about was me living super holy, watching the right television shows, reading the right books, saying the right words. And I'm being extremely like harsh in my description right now. I'm using hyperbole, but you get what I'm saying. There was like this tension for me. And so just to quickly wrap up this answer, and by the way, it's on you to think you could get a short answer with a question. So, so jam-packed, so loaded. For me, my story, I think, in finding my calling and stuff was learning to reconcile these two worlds, and coming to understand that actually, like, you know, God was in Wheaton, Illinois, too. In that he was even in those places that I just described in this like rather cynical way, and just coming to reconcile those two worlds and find my place in it, which was to really try to speak the truth about who God was and what he wants from his follower, or what I thought he wanted from his followers in response to a world that's in so much pain, you know.
Well, I mean, I'm 99.9% sure that, you know, white evangelicalism, there's really only one accepted pronoun, and that is I, or me, I guess, if you will. You know, so I know that the clashing, the tension of kind of the culture and family you're coming out of into that historically evangelical space. You obviously have a passion for justice, co-founding the Micah Institute and serving as the VP at Tearfund. Of all the ways to express a vocational calling, why was this the line of work you wanted to go into?
So I actually wanted to work in international development in the field abroad somewhere. So when I was in college, I studied at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was really committed to, you know, moving somewhere, living like a quiet life as a theologian, farmer, community development practitioner. I met a number of those people. I really wanted to be like that. And I felt that calling like very secured on my life pretty early. And then when I was in college, though, I still had a couple years to kill before I could do that, you know? And I started searching for, okay, the idea of like serving God with my day-to-day life and decisions isn't something that I park until I graduate and have a diploma and now I'm ready to go. I was like, there has to be something a North American college student like me can do to respond to global poverty. That was what I was particularly passionate about, in injustice, as I am. And so that sent me down this wild road of like simultaneously doing a lot on my campus with my friends related to awareness raising and worship and advocacy. This is when I caught this advocacy bug, and I started, you know, writing letters to my member of Congress with Bread for the World, and like just doing all of these kinds of actions. And what was amazing was it worked. Like, we sent thousands of letters to our member of Congress that year, and he was in shock. He was like, who are these college students sending me all these theologically articulate and policy-driven letters about why we shouldn't drill in Antarctica or in Alaska? Who are these college students urging me to protect the environment and the indigenous communities that depend on that land in Alaska, telling me we shouldn't drill there? Who are these college students telling me to, from a Christian perspective, why we need to respond to the crisis in Darfur, Sudan? And so he came and he met with us. And that really opened up this whole world to me where I was like, wow, maybe I'm going to park the idea of moving abroad and being a theologian farmer and kind of keep going down this route for a while. And so I got involved with an organization called the Micah Challenge, which was like the precursor to the Micah Institute that you mentioned. And Micah Challenge was a global Christian movement to overcome poverty. And it was a big and wild family of organizations, denominations. CBF was actually a partner for quite a few years in there. And all kinds of individuals. And we mobilized advocacy campaigns around these global issues. It was started by church leaders throughout the global South, many of whom were connected to Tearfund. So that's kind of how that led me that road.
Well, it'd be remiss if we didn't give you an opportunity to talk about Tearfund. For those that aren't familiar, with the organization, tell us more about it.
Yeah, so Tearfund originally began 50 years ago in the UK as the relief and development arm of the Evangelical Alliance in the UK. So Tearfund is actually began as an acronym, the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund. And since then, it's obviously expanded and grown and is its own organization. In Tearfund USA, where I work, has been around now for a few years. And Tearfund is an international relief and development agency that has really a couple of focus areas. We primarily work through local churches around the world in partnership, using a model called Church and Community Transformation. So it's really similar to community organizing, actually, very theologically rooted in just mobilizing churches and communities to come up with the answers to their own issues and to be the leaders in that solution. And some of these programs are completely run by the folks going through that process, including the resources to do it are coming from within the community. We also do disaster response, so just responding to crisis areas, particularly related to conflict. We have an organizational focus on conflict zones and responding in fragile states. And then the last thing we do is advocacy, which is kind of where I had started my story, recognizing that doing that kind of work to try to overcome poverty, to challenge the injustice in the world, can't be in a bubble, because it's impacted by policies from nations, policies from corporations. It's impacted by behaviors, culture, all these things. So we do quite a bit of advocacy work to try to shape the bigger picture of the landscape that we work in.
Your work in ending extreme poverty and injustice has close ties to the environment. For some that might not see that connection, explain to us how poverty, injustice, and environmental degradation are all interwoven.
Yeah. When I first started out doing the work I do, I did not know how interwoven they were. It was kind of a discovery over time. Actually, I was speaking to a group not that long ago, and I was actually trying to find a way to demonstrate this very thing, how interwoven and interconnected we are. And so if you will allow me, I have a weird proposition or like mind prompt, that's the word I'm looking for. So I started researching what would the world look like without trees. Now, this will never happen because the rate of tree growth and tree death, et cetera, is such that it's never going to happen like this. So don't be worried. I'm not like presenting something that could happen. But imagine right now, like Thanos snapped his fingers and there is no more trees. Trees are eliminated. What would that do? How different would the world be? And as I started researching this, I was amazed. All life in the ocean, so in the ocean, not on land, with the disappearance of trees, all life in the ocean would become extinct. Because the ocean would become so acidic because of all the things that trees absorb from the environment would now go into the ocean. It becomes so acidic that all life would cease to exist in the ocean, except for possibly jellyfish. Apparently, they're resilient. Humans would eventually all die. There would be waves of that because of, being loss of oxygen, asthma, all these issues, toxins in the air, etc. There would be mass extinction of species. So I'm not going to keep going with this idea because it's never going to happen. But it struck me because I was like, we are so connected, all of creation. And God made us this way. This isn't by accident. We're all so interconnected. And kind of the lie that I think has been told is that for humans to flourish, the environment has to suffer. And that if the environment suffers for the purpose of human flourishing, it's an acceptable cost. And that's even been believed in the industries that I work in the international development world. That was long considered okay. And the reality is that's all false. Our flourishing and the flourishing of the rest of creation is completely bound up. We see this with the impact of climate change on the poorest people in our world. So as our Earth is shifting, as climate is changing, we see that it's becoming harder and harder for people to grow food. So a degraded environment where it's harder for plants to flourish becomes a degraded environment where it's harder for humans to eat. And we've actually seen a rise in global hunger that began a few years ago. And it was the first time there was an increase in the rate of people experiencing hunger in decades. The entire time I worked with the Micah Challenge and at the Micah Institute and all of those years, every year we saw a decrease in the number of people experiencing hunger. And then it started spiking about 4 years ago. And that spike is partly related to conflict and partly related to a degraded environment that can't produce food. I could go on. Displacement, refugees. There's a lot of ways where a degraded environment pushes people further into poverty or pushes people into very desperate situations. And so, yeah, we are very interconnected. And that can sound like a burden, but I actually think it's a beautiful gift from God, because then you see how the redemption of all things is one single purpose. It's all wrapped up in one purpose. And I find a lot of hope in that, actually.
Well, let's talk about the theology of all this. From a theological perspective, many Christian faith traditions don't embrace global warming, let alone the connection between issues of environment and poverty. Why do you think there is a theological disconnect for many?
So I think part of it is a misinterpretation of Genesis, and this idea of what our role in creation was. I think it's passages in Genesis have been used to justify kind of not caring about the earth or using it for our own purposes. But I think that at this stage, any fairly disciplined reading would show that, no, I think God's actually saying, you're made in my image and I'm the one who created all of this and is caring for and providing plants for all things to eat and flourish. And so in my image, your mandate is to also care for all these things. I don't think it's like some stretch to pull that out. I think sometimes people do theological gymnastics to land somewhere. I think in this case, the people who've done gymnastics are the ones who read Genesis 1 and come out from there thinking we get to destroy the earth. That's the theological gymnastics. And unfortunately, that reading, was highly acceptable for a long time. So I think that's part of the reason. I think part of it, too, is just reactionary against culture. So the kinds of folks who were saying some of the things I was saying, imagine a world where trees are gone all of a sudden, are the kind of people church folks didn't want to hang out with. And I'm not going to argue against that. I just think that sometimes we let people weren't thinking theologically. I think they were thinking culturally, and they're thinking, I don't want to be involved in this radical stuff, or but we should all have the ability to detach any kind of issue or what I would actually just call sin in the world from whatever camps might be talking about them. We have a polarized society politically. It's very polarized culturally in many ways. We should be able to have the discernment to detach things from those battles and look at them as Christians and look at them from Scripture. And when you do that, there is just no way to land, again, unless you do some kind of really, really avant-garde reading and land at a place where we get to abuse the earth or neglect it. Or even in worst case scenarios is a theology that says the worse things get, the better, because Jesus comes. So let's actually let it all burn. Let's let it all get worse. I've met those people. They exist. Now, thankfully, I don't think that's a dominant worldview, but there was a time when it probably was, So I hope I haven't offended anyone who's watching. I'm just trying to answer the question clearly, directly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's really at the root of that theological disconnect? And I realize there's not a simple answer to that question. So not only what's at the root of it, but what's the solution to this theological shortfall within many Christian traditions?
So, I don't know if I can answer that adequately, but something I've thought a lot about is our doctrine of sin is actually at the root of many of the justice-related issues you see us failing to act on. And let me unpack that. Is we have so conceived of sin as personal that it's been very difficult for us to see the impacts of sin as holistically. So for some reason, it's possible to believe that we can be so sinful, but then all the things that we build and operate in, and the political systems we create, and the economic systems, and the banking systems, and the energy production systems, that none of those can be infected by our sin. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I think having an understanding that sin is actually a much greater and honestly more serious theological idea in reality than I think we've given it credit. And the flip side of seeing sin is so expansive and recognizing that our economic systems, our political systems, our social systems, our neighborhoods, everything can be infected with what is broken, what is not right. It then changes, the flip side of that coin is redemption. So Jesus saves not just me. He didn't just come to save my soul. He came to save all of that. And so that's honestly what I think the root is. Like if you really, really dig down, because you could dig into the root of the environmental theology and that kind of thing. But I think fundamentally, it really comes down to what do we believe the gospel is? Do we believe that all things need redeeming, or do we believe it's just our souls? And if we come to see kind of the gravity of sin, we also get to see the gravity of redemption, that Jesus has come to redeem all these things. So then as his followers, naturally, we get to work. We get to work on some of that. So I don't know if that gets at the question or not.
I'm just thinking you're a lot nicer than I was going to say pride, greed, control, and a number of things. A few years ago, you did a talk at Q conference about climate change, and you argued that the global church has been screaming to the Western church about the effects of our support of environmental degradation. Why do you think the Western church, specifically American evangelical tradition, has such a hard time listening to the stories of others, especially our global faith family, let alone our suffering neighbors?
We have a hard time listening to the inconvenient stories. I think people happy to listen to the stories that support a certain narrative. You know, when I was at Micah Challenge, we did a big climate campaign. Oh, and my goodness, there was a lot of people who didn't want to be a part of that. But then when we did a campaign on corruption, people came out of the woodwork. They were thrilled to talk about corruption. You know, they love to talk about how African leaders were corrupt. So people want to hear the stories that are convenient to their worldview. And the testimonies of Christians in island nations like the Philippines, the testimonies of Christians all throughout Africa who have for years been saying to their denominations or the Christian NGO that they partner with or the churches that support them, we can't grow food in the way we always have because of climate change. Those stories I don't think have been heard or taken seriously. And I think it's because for us, climate, the greatest predictor, and there's like actual data analysis on this because people analyze perceptions of climate change, not just climate change. The greatest predictor of whether or not someone takes climate change seriously is not political party, it's religious affiliation. And I think the two are obviously connected, but I think that, like, you know, it's been hard for people to, what I was saying earlier, like if the culture or the world is talking about something, some Christians have a very hard time being able to just take that away from that conversation and think about it as a Christian. They look at the conversation like, whose team am I on? Do I like that person more or this person? And they just get on whatever team, you know, feels right to them, which is not a Christian way to engage, in my opinion. And so that has absolutely happened with climate change. There was also a massive disinformation campaign about climate change, and even many Christians got involved in that. I know this sounds like conspiracy level stuff, but actively involved, like receiving money from foundations to provide disinformation about climate change from a Christian perspective. This exists. I'll send you the links later. So I think for all those reasons, like it's been an issue that the church has been slow to take on in the U.S. But I'll tell you something, that point, though, that the global church has been speaking and really just saying, are we going to listen, or are we going to believe that somehow this farmer in rural Zambia who testified to me about the crop degradation and inability to grow food because of climate change and lack of water and all this, that they too are on George Soros's list getting money to say these things? Like, are we going to believe, and that was a joke, obviously, like I don't think that, but I just had to realize I had to clarify that. Like, are we going to believe it's all some huge conspiracy over just believing that people are telling the truth? And when I put it like that, you won't believe how many people are like, all right, I'm with you. I tried for years to talk about the science or this, and people can fight that and fight that. But when you just put it like that, like, do you really believe they're all in on it? Oh, so many people are like, no, you're right, they're not. Like, I believe this is happening. So, yeah.
What is just one story you can tell us about how we are affecting our family in Christ across the world?
Yeah. So, you know, I think to highlight this, I'm actually going to tell a story of a woman who went to one of these church and community transformation trainings I talked about earlier that Tearfund does, because I think it really highlights what could be versus what is. So I think a lot of us have gotten very comfortable in how we relate to our brothers and sisters globally, especially those living in poverty. You know, we make a donation to relief somewhere, we make a donation to some kind of project, build something, and that has perpetuated some kind of a system that actually isn't that sustainable, to be honest with you. And it also doesn't ever get at the root of an issue like climate change that's affecting people. So it might see people who are experiencing hunger and just keep feeding them without ever asking, why are they hungry? Why can't they grow food? Why can't this farmer who's grown food his whole life grow food now, you know? And so to kind of tell a story that demonstrates that, I want to talk about this woman named Polly who was a farmer and typically could grow 18 bags of maize in a growing season. Her family needed like 16 of those for themselves, and then they would sell the other couple for other things. They're subsistence farmers. In the last few years before she attended this training, she was only able to grow 3 bags using the same methods, the same land, everything. And that was absolutely because of a changing climate. It was hotter, it was drier, and the old methods weren't working. And I think an old school U.S. Christian response to that would be like, let's package food and deliver it to this person, or let's give to feed this person. And what actually ended up happening was she heard about agricultural training program at her church. She went to that training, learned a method called conservation agriculture. We teach it using a Bible study. It's very cheesy sounding. It's called Farming God's Way. But it teaches methods that are really affordable and accessible to people living in poverty that actually can help them grow food in a changing climate, given those realities. It's called climate adaptation. So she did that. In their first year, she was able to grow 16 bags of maize, up from 3. Then she sold some of those bags and bought livestock. Then she used the money she earned from having livestock, being able to sell off like the babies and stuff, to buy a bicycle and use the bicycle to fetch water. And then the story continues. And after a number of years, this woman has started a business, owning a donut shop. She's putting her husband through school. She's expanding her house. And I look at that story, all this transformation happened with very little input, like she did it all. And what would have happened in the old school model would have been to just continue to hand food to someone like this year after year after year after year. And so why am I bringing that up in response to your question? Because I think we're at a shift where there's literally a decision being made. Do we keep interacting with the global church in this handout model, or do we honor the dignity and power they have and see them unleashed to transform their own communities? And we are their brothers and sisters, supporting them the best ways we can, which might be advocating for climate policy rather than handing them food. I don't know if this is making sense. It's kind of complex, but that's what came to mind when you asked that question, is like we need to shift how we engage and see people as powerful as they are, and then ask, what can only we do? Because they can't change our nation's policies related to carbon emissions, or they can't change certain things that we can influence. You know what I mean? And so I think that's how I've been looking at ways we're connected.
When you look at the most active voices in the fight against global warming, there isn't a lot of Christian folks in the mix. What do you think that says to the rest of the world about how our faith tradition feels about these issues?
That feels like you already know the answer. I've started to look at a lot of these things as evangelism, to be honest with you, because I realize when I show up at like a climate summit or something, and I say, I'm here because I follow Jesus of Nazareth, and he's redeeming all that's broken in this world, and this is a huge piece of that, I'm actually telling them who God is. I'm declaring that this is what God is like. This is what God cares about. This is what God envisioned for his beautiful world. And that's evangelism, I'm getting to say who God is. And similarly, when we speak against things that are wrong, and we do it as followers of Jesus, rooted in him, we're getting to say what God is not like, how God did not intend this world to be, And so all that is to say, there's a huge missed, I'm speaking to the church planners right now, there's a huge missed evangelism opportunity when we're not involved in these issues, because it sends the message to people not that we're not just that we don't care what's happening in the world. We don't care about pervasive poverty. We don't care about racism. We don't care about inequality. We don't care. It says we're sending a message that God doesn't care about these things. And so why do we wonder that so many people walk away from a faith that has nothing to say about Black Lives Matter or environmental justice or refugees? Why are we shocked when people walk away from a faith that has conveyed by omission, we're not involved in God's not concerned about these things, and so we're not either, you know? So I think that's what it says.
For many listening or watching this conversation, they might get it theologically, and they might even want to do something about it. But they might not know where to start.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend for someone who feels like an island unto themselves when it comes to this kind of work?
Yeah, and that's common. Oftentimes people feel like they're the only person in their church who might feel this way, or one of a few. And, you know, from my experience, I would say start with simple things that you know you can do. For example, prayer. Begin just by praying. Asking God to show you what's next and reveal to you what you can do each day. But I would add to that some really tangible things. So, you know, the church is a beautiful community that often has things called small groups. And I have found that small groups love to study. And so get like your small group or whatever body you're connected to try to study something. We have a study called Live Justly that really digs into some of the theology, but also the really practical things. Like, what does all this mean for how I spend my money? What does all this mean for like where I buy clothes? You know, it gets into super practical stuff. And I find that like finding a community of people to ask these questions with is probably more important than finding the right action to take. Because I've found that the community can like inspire you, sustain you, and together you all can like go on this journey. So I would encourage people to check out that study, Live Justly. I would also encourage people to pray, to find a trusted organization you can link up with and start taking action through and that sort of thing.
Well, if you want to stay connected with Jason, check out his work at tearfundusa.org. Of course, follow him on social media. Jason, thank you for making the time to have this conversation. We're grateful for your great work and call for us to listen to the story of our neighbor, especially our global neighbor who feels the ecological brunt of our environmental choices.
Well, thank you so much. I really am so glad you asked me to do this. I have a deep affection for the CBF because of my historic connections with Micah Challenge, but it had been a long time since I was connected, so I'm just so happy to have this opportunity, and happy Earth Day. Thank you again.
Good morning. It's Jeff Lee, CBF field personnel in Skopje, Macedonia. Today we are in our greenhouse. Our greenhouse here was created as a community garden for the local community. We see here that we are having a hydroponic system. Each one of these holes here will be full with a plant, and we'll have water pumping the water hole system. We have 1,300 holes here to fill. This is just a little bit of the work that we do here in Macedonia. We also work with livestock bank, where we loan cows to local farmers to increase their production. We also work with the group home for adults with developmental delays, providing food support as well as programming and other things that they need to help them during these tough times. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about Earth Day. Earth Day is a day where we celebrate the earth, but I think every day should be Earth Day, because we live every day on this beautiful earth. We share this environment with people around us, the animals, the plants, the mountains, the sky, and every day we should be celebrating that day, because every day we have the opportunity to work together to create a better sustainable future for those around us. We work here providing food for those in need because food security is an environmental issue, and it should be something that we think about this Earth Day, providing food for those in need. Our food is important to understand where it comes from. How's it produced? How are we consuming the things that we consume? We started this project here because we wanted to produce food locally for those in need in this community. We also should be thinking about the other things that we consume. Our clothes, our phones, our computers, the things that we do every day. How are the things that we consume made? Are they made sustainable? Do they seek to protect the environment, or at least have a negative or neutral impact on the environment? These are things that we should be concerned about this Earth Day. When we think about the Earth Day, we should also be thinking about how God created what we see. Let's think about the things we create, the things that we do. They are important to us, right? So if we think about how God has created the earth, we should be thinking about how important the earth is to God, and how important our role is in to join together with God in creation. We have that ability. God is using us to create what we see. God uses us here at CBF to create this. This is something that we've worked hard to create as an opportunity we have to meet the needs of the people around us. By providing healthy food that lessens the impact on the environment and is sustainable, so that future generations are also able to do the same for them, to meet their needs. We are living in a global pandemic, at a time of great chaos. The environmental crisis that we see is getting worse every day. And you might be thinking, well, how can we make a change in that? How can we have an impact? There's no hope. But I want to tell you there is hope. There's hope in our working together with Christ to create a sustainable future. One way we can do that is to remember all the R's. Recycle, reduce, reuse, repost, recite, react. These are all things that we could do. We recycle. The things that we use, we reduce the amount that we need if we recycle, reuse. We don't need the newest things every day. We can reuse the things that we've already have. I think another important thing is to be an advocate. We need to be advocates for the environment. We need to be advocates for the communities around us. It is important to understand that the environmental crisis we live in is a local and a global problem. So we need to have local and global solutions. One of those things is we need to be advocating at the local level for environmental protection, ordinances, policies, laws, at our state, our community level, yes, the federal level, and of course, the global level. We need to be telling our friends and family about what could be done to protect the environment this Earth Day. We could be talking with the people around us about the food that is produced. Social media, for all of its flaws, has the potential to spread the message. Let us use that to spread the message to those around us that we can make a difference. in this environment. We can make a difference on this Earth Day. Now, I'm not saying you have to do what I do, is create a community garden that's full of hydroponic systems. You could plant a tree. You could eat local produced food. You can go without the newest, most high-tech model of the next generation of gadgets, because yours right now still works. These are all little things that we could do. You could stand up and march in your community for protecting the environment, protecting the communities of need around you. These are all environmental issues that you could do and be a part of this Earth Day. So I want to thank you for coming with us here in Skopje, Macedonia, spending a little time with us, learning about what we could do to impact the world, what we could do to impact the people around us. So thank you, God bless, and happy Earth Day.
Seeking transformational development is a key commitment of CBF Global Missions. With God's help, we seek to transform systems that suppress the capacity of individuals and communities so that we can recognize, claim, and celebrate the God-given gifts of all people and places. The gospel compels us to take part in transforming structures that oppress people and degrade God's creation. We understand that serving with the marginalized includes attending to the factors that are causing their marginalization. In the context of global poverty and global migration in which we serve, we're noticing that environmental and climate-related matters are increasingly causative factors. More than half of our field personnel are engaged in some form of ministry to refugees and migrants. Many of these are leaving situations made untenable by chronic instability, in part due to environmental degradation. In one year, there's severe drought, and then in the next, there's severe flooding. Both are stressing the resilience required to adapt to a changing global climate. In other areas, greater competition for fewer natural resources leaves the land exhausted, and conflict or hunger are the result. Creation is indeed groaning. It may not surprise you then that as part of my work as Associate Coordinator of Global Missions, I participate in a Climate Reality Leadership Corps with a keen interest in environmental advocacy. Along with several of my colleagues, both in the office and on the field, we formed the CBF Network for Environmental Stewardship 2 years ago as a forum for critical discussions and action in matters relating to the care of creation. Tonight, in recognition of our need to provide more active leadership in this area, we ask you to celebrate with us the designation of field personnel Jeff Lee, Jessica Hearn, and Rick Burnett as CBF environmental advocates. Each of these folks have already devoted major parts of their ministry towards sustainable environment initiatives as they seek both to honor God, the author of creation, and to more fully serve God's people. May all of us, filled with the wonder of God's handiwork, notice more intentionally, care more deeply, hold more loosely, and tread more lightly upon the earth that is our common home.